You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
And it's one of the big myths around mothering, right? Like if you have children or you take on something big, could be a career with employees, right? Like suddenly, or sometimes even, just in a partnership or relationship, women are wired to care. So we will, more and more put ourselves down the list.
Dr. Gertrude Lyons has been a master life coach, a relationship expert for over 2 decades. Through her Rewriting the Mother Code initiative, which challenges the traditional notions of motherhood and womanhood, Dr. Lyons has become a national mothering revolutionary. She challenges the myths surrounding womanhood, mothering, and what it means to be a mother. She believes that the current model for mothering in our culture is broken, limited, constricting, and disempowering. And she questions preconceived beliefs and leans into topics that will tap into the powerful femininity within all of us. Today, we are going to be debunking the myths of motherhood and womanhood. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I feel very honored to be on your show.
Well, I love what you're doing. I think a lot of people listening to the intro are going to be like, what does all this mean? So let's start with, what does woman of value mean to you?
Yeah, I love that question, Sandy. It was because a bunch of things came kind of like tumbling in when I heard that question. And so what I thought about was woman of value. And for me, on my growth path right now, have over many years been working on honoring feminine values. So there's a certain tie when I hear woman of value. I think, okay, I'm most valuing myself when I'm honoring feminine values over masculine values. And I don't mean man, woman so much. I more so mean, the feminine values of being and caring and some of those that aren't as honored in our world today, right? And we're overvaluing the masculine. So for me, I know I have to create my own value. I can't look outside of myself for it. And I feel like I'm living most in alignment with my values when I'm honoring my feminine values.
I love this. It's always interesting to hear everyone's description of woman of value and what it means to them, because it's always different. And the feminine and masculine values come up a lot in my career as a dating and relationship coach, because what I see often is women showing up who are super successful at work and not in their relationships with men. And they often lead with all of those masculine values of competition and my intelligence and what I'm building in this world and my work. And all of that is important. And I think what often happens is women feel like they have to dumb themselves down in order to bring up those feminine values. So if you can explain a little bit more about what that means, so women don't go, wait, I'm not going to be some little sissy woman, and what about all these accomplishments that I've had in my life?
No, I spot on with, what, and I totally am in alignment with what you're saying, Sandy, in those examples around dating, because we live in this world that overvalues the masculine, right? The achievement, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? We want that. And as a woman, I want to develop my masculine and, honor the masculine values, but not overvalue it. I want to use my masculine values of achievement, of my intelligence versus wisdom, achievement versus, I guess I can use the word collaboration. I don't know. But when I can make those distinctions, start learning what those are, and understand that I don't have to get rid of those that I developed, right? Or in my case, I didn't fully develop my masculine values. I kind of rode the feminine values of, the external, the aesthetics. I was acknowledged for external beauty and how things looked and overvalued that. But then when I got, and I was really working on building a sense of what feminine values were, I realized, oh, I can develop my masculine so that I can honor my feminine and have those be a vehicle and work for. When I started becoming a coach, I wanted those to be in the forefront, right? I wanted my empathy, I wanted my caring, I wanted being to be what, we put out, or, what was valued as much, but I still needed structure. I need goals. I need, the achievement aspect in service of that feminine. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I kind
that's
of
so
went a little over.
interesting
Yeah.
that you came at it from the external values of beauty and more of the feminine
Mm.
values and learning to develop your masculine, but then learning to come back to center and use both. Because I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think as a leader, as a woman leader, the beauty that we bring to leadership is not about being the loudest person in the room by powering over people. And that
Mm-hmm.
whole power structure is such an important conversation where people often power over instead of powering with. And collaboration is powering with. It is a quality that is so beautiful and so missing in so many leadership positions, don't you think?
Oh, I do. And I love that you brought that up because, if we look at this year and COVID, I think feminine leadership really took a front seat in many ways. Like the countries that did the best, areas that were governed, companies that had women as in their leadership teams or, at the head, did the best. I mean, success as far as, keeping the company going, but also like the health and safety of everybody. And that wasn't by using their masculine, they really were and they've talked about it. And if, all the articles that have been written about it lately, I think really showed it. So I'm really hoping this year kind of helps catapult us, because I know we kind of regressed in many ways as far as women leaving the workforce in ways that the care provided by women wasn't honored, but the leadership wise, and as you're saying, leading with feminine values. And I'm also really grateful for the women that came before us that got to the table by using masculine, by kind of being one of the guys, right? And that was the only way to get there. And I think it got our foot in the door, but now we're seeing the two in harmony and working together, because it's not like we now want to, diminish or lower the value of the masculine. We really want the two of them working in harmony together. And that's when I think we're really going to see some beautiful differences in our world that are very needed.
I agree. I think we're at a real transitional time. I
Me
think that
too.
men are changing drastically as well. With
Yeah.
the Me Too movement, we had a lot of men who went overboard in the other direction where they were asking permission for everything that they did with women. But it brought out empathy in men and gave men permission to not be so bullish. And I think men are now coming back into what's my masculinity? Where do I want to be more firm, leader-ish?
Mm-hmm.
And where do I want to check in with women? And I think that balance, I think we're coming into that, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So let's talk about your aha woman of value moment, that
Mm.
moment when you really started to find your value and transition into the person you are today.
Well, there's a number of kind of instances came to mind, Sandy, as I looked back, over time. And there's some that were in my initial growth path of just that initial awakening of what it's like to look inward and look at your life, more consciously. I mean, that was huge, so there was a really big aha moment when I was engaged to my now husband. We'll be married 31 years in June. And my boss at the time said, when I told him I was engaged, that the best thing I can tell you to do is to get premarital counseling. Now we'd call it coaching. This was in 1989, right? This wasn't the thing that it is now. And I had this aha moment of, wow, I have not been I really don't have great models, and neither does my husband for relationship. And like I said earlier, I overvalued the external. I figured marrying him, he was smart, attractive, um, well off, and I kind of had it made and really didn't have a vision for myself beyond that, right? Like that was the American dream. But, some early on aha moments were really to confront the fact that that was shallow and superficial. And I felt very empty inside, without a deeper and bigger vision, and starting to value myself as a woman, particularly around my emotions, what I cared about. I mean, no, I had never explored those arenas, at all. And then, so I'd say that's like, encompasses my earliest on. And then I'll name the one kind of more recent at the other end, of this point in my life, was when, after raising our daughters, we have two daughters, they're now 22 and 24. But when they were like, one was in college, they were nearing that empty nest, that I had a really big aha moment on a spiritual pilgrimage. Every year I go on a pilgrimage to sacred sites led by my mentor, Dr. Judith Wright. And in this particular pilgrimage, we were in Laos, and we went to this cave, and it was a cave that had been revered for a long time, but currently was being used. It was where kind of the broken Buddhas would come, like ones that, couldn't be used in the temples anymore, weren't good enough to be there, but they've created this pilgrimage site, this sanctuary for them. And it was called they were, the beautifully imperfect Buddhas. And in my meditation in that space, I really confronted myself and my journey as a mother, as a woman, but as a mother raising my daughters. And I had a ton of regret and remorse just come to the surface, like where I had made mistakes, where I wished I had done things differently. But there was this beautiful, compassionate space that allowed me to not, just feel bad about that or feel guilty about it, but instead feel those feelings fully, and then start to realize, like, okay, there's some specific things that I would do differently were I to go back, have that chance to go back. And it was really much more about mothering myself. Like I felt like we parented our children fine. There's some things I would do differently there, but it was more that I kind of stepped off the path of my own transformation. And that was really the bigger regret, is that along with my children, I didn't keep growing myself. So that was where I wanted to kind of dive in, see this, that didn't have to be a wasted time, and that I could really use that and use this realization and this regret and remorse, to re-engage with it for myself, but then share that message. And hence, it started me on a whole new path. It's when I decided to go get my doctorate and really dig in and study and, do research around this topic so that I could come out and be an advocate for, I guess I would call it, it's where rewriting the mother code was born in so many words, but it's been a journey. Put it that way.
Wow.
So I gave you two. Sorry, but I want
two,
to.
it's okay.
But
there are no rules.
Yeah.
And they're both really excellent examples. One is at the beginning, and that kind of was the catalyst to the second pivotal moment where you were facing the next stage of life. And I love that. I mean, without the first pivotal moment, you wouldn't have had self-reflection. You wouldn't be able to go on these pilgrimages and have a spiritual journey because you were so disconnected from that part of yourself.
Yeah, 100%, Sandy. And thanks for acknowledging that, because I'm so grateful for that opening, and it's funny because in that moment I was kind of upset with my boss. Like, he didn't even congratulate me. He was just like, go get counseling, and he was in the midst of a divorce. I mean, I had context, some context for it, but I was still a little hurt by that. But yes, I'm so grateful for, I consider him one of my guardian angels, for opening that door, and opening that space for us, because I could pretty much guarantee that my husband and I would not be married. You know, we were set up for failure in many, many ways, you know, just even with what I shared, you can kind of get the gist, right? What I was coming into, my vision for the relationship was not very expansive. And there were, and that was, you know, one of the reasons I saw alcoholism on both sides of our family, affairs that we already knew about, you know, patterns that somehow I had an inkling like, ooh, you know, this can't, how am I supposed to know how to do this if this is what I was around, right? And now I know how much that got wired in, and I'm much more aware of like, yeah, that's a reality.
Yeah, and most people don't do that work, and they dive in and keep repeating patterns. And so when you can break a pattern, like a
Mm,
family legacy, so to speak, and create a new legacy, I think that is such a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful gift to also give to your daughters. So
yeah.
I'd love to hear the impact, like who your daughters became,
Mm.
especially after you went through the second transition.
Oh, yeah, I love that, Sandy. That's really interesting to look at because, well, let's see, there's a few ways I would frame that because, you know, when you have dedicated so much of your life, and my husband and I have found so much value in, you know, doing growth work and being on a personal transformation and spiritual journey, you realize at some point, like your kids may not choose that. You know, I mean, even though we raised them in it, we know that we gave them, you know, certain social emotional intelligence. We did parent child trainings in in our organization at the Right Foundation. And so I knew that we gave them a good foundation that was unusual, you know, and something we certainly didn't have. But then where it was going to go beyond that, I realized like, wow, I really have no control over that. And I can wish and hope um, that they add that to their journey. And it really was a gift of, and they've, you know, they would share about, and especially as they got into high school and college, really things that they didn't appreciate, or things that we would do to reinforce emotions. And that when we were growing up, they were kind of like, you know, that's where we play the feelings game at dinner, right? Like we would review our day by looking at the 5 emotions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy. And I'm like, let's play the feelings game. I don't want to play the feelings game, you know, like that, those kind of responses. I'm like, nope, you know, got it. We're going to do it, whether you like it or not. And even coming on the weekends, they weren't always super happy about, but they started realizing, oh, they now have um, a broader social emotional intelligence awarenesses. You know, my daughter's now out of college and works for a large consulting firm. And when I look at, you know, when she has shared reviews that she's gotten from uh, bosses and things like that, it's much more about like, yes, she does her job well, but wow, she can really relate to any level, you know, above her, peers, below her. And um, she sees that difference, right? But then, so they're aware and they acknowledge that it's given them something that they're grateful for in relationship. But I think this past year in COVID is when we really saw kind of it was, I guess, a digging back in a way, and as a family that we hadn't in quite some time. And that I really initiated that because one of the tenets in rewriting the mother code is that times of chaos and upset, like when you first have a child, you know, having a baby, you're thrown into disequilibrium, or anytime you're taking on something big, right? It really kind of throws you off. But that's the ripest time for our growth and transformation when we're in those spaces. And you know, a lot of our wiring will say like, you know, nope, let's just hold the line and kind of, you know, do what we know and used to. But I said, if we're going to be together, which we were for different chunks of the time, we're going to like dive in. And so I set up a bunch of family coaching sessions, you know, with our mentor. And we kind of explored where we were at in all of our relationships. We, you know, cleared things amongst each other. We had an assignment to sit down and tell truths, like what we didn't, what we, I mean, I'm going to use the word hate, but, you know, hated about each other, what we were upset about. We didn't want to do that. Like that sounded, you know, and as much as we knew better, but it cleared and opened up such a beautiful space for us, and such that now my older daughter, she and her probably soon to be fiance they've embarked on their own growth journey, so they did some couples coaching themselves, but then started at the Right Foundation that I'm a part of, our Year of More Personal Transformation program. And they're finding huge value in it for themselves. And my younger daughter, just out of college, is kind of exploring things themselves. So it's a relief, but I also knew I had to kind of let go of what that would look like for them and trust.
And that's such a great point, that it's so easy to just project what we want, especially if we're more self-aware. And they're like,
Yes.
wait a minute, I have all these skills and I've been trying to teach you stuff. And then you just don't want to do it. But it sounds like they both, because you and your husband were on the same page, it sounds like also both of you wanted the growth. I was in a marriage where my husband was so resistant to this kind of introspection and growth and working through problems that it just drove a wedge between us. And what's interesting, though, is that post divorce, as we were divorcing, actually, he became more self-aware. He realized what was at stake, and he started to study nonviolent communication. And he became an empathy expert. I just went on his sailboat last week. When my kids wanted to do like an early Father's Day celebration, so my son said, "Do you want to join us?" And in the past, I didn't always want to be stuck on a sailboat with my ex-husband, but we've come a long way, and this was probably the best we've ever been. We started talking about the kind of inner work that we do with clients, and he does parts work with clients where he has them look at different entities that live within us and how it covers up our essence. And we do it very differently, but it was fascinating to be able to share what we've accomplished and who we've become, and do it in a really peaceful, kind way. And I think it was good for my kids to see also, like, it took a long time, but we both value communication now, and kindness and compassion. And I think if you started counseling before marriage and put those values out on the table and said, these are important to us as a family, and how are we going to create this together? It is so important. So I love that you did it then, and that you continued, and that you now during COVID. I mean, my kids would never, ever have those conversations. So I think that's miraculous. And right? I don't know. They're older than your kids. So I have a 26-year-old, a 30-year-old, and a 3-year-old. My oldest daughter is married with 3 children. And so I get to watch all the different stages now. And my oldest, she lives in Israel with her kids, which is hard, but just was thinking about what you were saying before about the different transitional times, and becoming a mother. For her, mothering 3 small children has been really challenging, but she takes it really seriously. And I love the values that she's giving her children. And a lot of them are about feelings and expressing feelings. And her kids get along so beautifully, and my kids did not. So she's doing something really, really great. And it's hard for her to take care of herself. And so that's a conversation I have a lot with her. So I'm just wondering if you have advice for people who are struggling, women. I'm sure that you do a lot of this work. But women who are struggling with the self-care piece, when they're so busy managing everyone else's life and trying to do a great job at everything. And then, they're not eating well, they're not exercising, they're not doing things that expand who they are as a person. What would you say to those women?
Yeah. Well, just as you were saying, the things, that we don't do well, like how do we build in this is where in the beginning of our conversation, right? The masculine in service of the feminine, because everything you named were the giving ourselves, our mothering ourselves, right? And mothering ourselves from the perspective of, if we think about, mothering our kids, like providing nourishment, through eating and tending to our bodies and things like that. But when we're so busy, and it's one of the big myths around mothering, right? Like if you have children or you take on something big, could be a career with employees, right? Like suddenly, or sometimes even, just in a partnership or relationship, women are wired to care. So we will, more and more put ourselves down the list, and we get certain nourishment from that caring for others. But you know, there is a point where if we're, and to use your words, if we're not valuing ourselves enough, and that's what I tend to find comes up a lot is, because that's everything from, expecting the support of your family, expecting this, valuing yourself, that you deserve to, have a husband that pitches in, or a partner, that your kids, pull their weight and do their share, that we're to get, and that me as mom, isn't, because I get a lot of needs met also, when I'm caring for others and I feel needed and wanted, but I end up losing, I end up, with an empty tank. And if one of my values is caring for others, if I'm not caring for myself, that capacity is way diminished. So now to look at, like, how do we do that? Right. This whole masculine piece, like setting up systems for ourselves, setting, speaking as a family, if it's around, if you have kids, in a relationship, and making this a group project, right? Because if mom's happy, everyone's happy. But we have to do the inner work then, and kind of like, like you, I would say, Sandy, it's that inner work that's the most valuable. We're not going to be able to do the things like give ourselves the proper nourishment, and that if we're not valuing ourselves. And that takes the deeper work, right? To explore where those blocks and barriers, mistaken beliefs we have about, ourselves, the world, what we can expect from the world, are very wired in very deeply. And we have to, there's coaching like you do, coaching like I do, programs, things that help us unpack all that so we can create new beliefs. We can start living more toward a life where it's not like that. Because then the other myth is, well, that's selfish, to just think of myself. And no, it's not at all. It's exactly what is needed for everybody to do better, is for me to do that deep work and that big work that allows me to value myself, to give myself those things and expect others to support me.
Yeah, it's so important to do that inner work. And there are so many things that we're not aware of at all that we believe are true, that are truths, but they're not really true. They're truths that we've told ourselves, or that we've been conditioned to believe. And I grew up in a home with a lot of taking care of others by my mom, but a lot of resentment and poor communication as well. So I was just writing about this from my weekly newsletter, that there was a lot of mind reading happening in my home. So it was expected to know what my mom needed done. And if we didn't know, then we were yelled at, that we didn't figure out that the house had to be cleaned or the meal needed to be cooked, because she was so overworked and took on too much and didn't delegate well. And I learned that I had to do it differently for my family and for myself. In my marriage, my husband was an enabler, so it was hard for me to get my kids to be on board. But after the divorce, I realized I set my kid, like I had to do it differently. Like there was no way I could function, have a career, manage a house, and my kids' emotional upheaval at the same time. And I sat them all down. I was like, rules are going to change around here. We're a team. We're a family. We're a team, and we all help each other here. And you may not like it, but we all need to take on different chores. And what would you like to do? Clean the bathrooms, do the vacuuming, which meals would you like to prepare? And they all do their own laundry, and they would, help out around the house. And some of them more happily than others, but
yes.
But it's what I always tell clients, especially the ones who have kids who are older, who should have been doing these things for years, because they not only depend too much on their mothers, but they become less able to do things for themselves. And so it's a disservice on both ends. I don't think people realize that you're actually training your kids' self-esteem to grow.
Mhm.
And when we can rely on ourselves and know, wow, I got this, I can do this, that is one of the biggest boosts to our self-worth.
Well, and that brings up, yes, I love that, Sandy, the everything that's showing the importance of grit, right? And self-efficacy in the forefront, which I think is particularly relevant for women, right? Because knowing that something's hard and we can do it, and having that empowerment and that women's empowerment. But we don't realize that if we're not allowing our kids to struggle, to have challenges, to, and to, I don't know, fend for themselves, then we really are disempowering them.
Yeah. I mean, my kids have come back to me and told me, like, I was so mad at you when you made me do X, Y, and Z, or you didn't let me
Yes.
hang out with this really toxic friend, or, and now I appreciate it. And they've told me, I have, this was many years ago, but like I had friends who couldn't even heat something up in the microwave. They had no idea how to do anything for themselves. And what happens as adults is we feel helpless, and it's like the
Yep.
rescuing parent who wants to do it because it makes them feel good. Well, what's the effect on your child? And so I think this is just a really important thing. If you're listening, if you're a parent, even if your kids are older, many people are still in that
Totally.
dynamic as with older children, adult children. And then there's the grandkids, like, what's your relationship with them? And how are you empowering these little girls and boys to be the
Yeah.
best they can be? So let's talk a little bit about who you are today. Like you've come so far. And what did you get your doctorate in? And then
So it's
what did you
a
do from
doctorate.
there?
It's an EDD, so a doctorate in education, and transformational leadership and coaching. But my study was on the raising women's awareness on the transformational opportunity in mothering. And so it was a study taking, women through a curriculum to break myths, just look at how our emotions play such a big part, and that it's possible to heal, grow, and kind of raise yourself along with your children. So to grow up with your children. And it ended up revealing so many beautiful things. Like I've felt that way, but to then do a study that shows the impact just in the seminar, let alone, ongoing coaching and what's possible. Because we really want to, what ended up happening out of that is, expanding the definition of mothering. And, something that I had picked up in my work and my coaching, my own personal coaching with Dr. Judith Wright was, that all women mother. And I brought that into the curriculum just as kind of a little side part, but that as women, and really, I think all of us, we all mother, we mother children if we choose to, but maybe careers, relationships, our dreams, ideas. We give birth, we create, conceive, and give birth all the time, right? Children are a unique experience of that, should we choose to do it, but that we're all, as women, way more connected in that arena. And I really want us to come together as women, from that perspective. But the women that came to that seminar and talks that I've done since then just feel so relieved to be able to talk about, all their different, thoughts, questions, ideas about what it means to mother. So, and then the most important person we need to mother is ourselves, right? So, in that we look at, technologies, tools to help us explore the dynamics that happen, through raising children and what it can mean in that. And when we get stirred up, and which happens all the time, right? And raising children, that our children are just bringing forth our work, and the work that we can do on ourselves, and to go on that journey with them is a lot of, kind of what all of this encompasses.
It's such interesting work. And I always said, like, when I had children, they were the mirror for me. They,
Yes.
like, boy, will they bring out every every flaw, everything. They
Yes.
taught me so much about myself when I was willing to look. in the beginning, I was so resistant to hearing what they had to say. How could you tell me this? You're my child. That's so disrespectful. And then I started listening. And I remember reading How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Listen So Kids Will Talk by Maslish, and I forgot who the other author is. Um, do you know who the authors are?
No, I don't.
Maslish and I
It's
forgot.
familiar, but I didn't read that book.
That was a pivotal book for me because I wasn't used to listening to my kids. I mean, what do they know? They're kids, right? But the reason they were so angry was because I wasn't hearing them. And so I got a lot of pushback and stubbornness, and I don't have to listen to you. And then I just started tuning in, and it was a game changer. But also, like, they would tell me things like, your tone of voice is not matching what you're saying. You think you're being kind right now, Mom, but your tone of voice is terrible. And I had to really work on that because that was so hardwired in me. So my kids taught me a lot. And also, if you're being watched all the time, you want to make sure that what they're watching is something you're proud of, as well as something you can model. And it sounds like for
100%.
you, like, you did such a good job of modeling emotional intelligence and being able to communicate feelings, needs, even if they didn't want to, because people who can do that, to me, that's the most important skill you can have.
100%. Like, that is really the linchpin to it all, right?
Yeah.
And even when we talked about self-care, like, all the aspects that we talked about all comes back to, our awareness and our ability to express responsibly our emotions, because I firmly believe, that it's a place where women need to step up and lead, but they're all of our superpowers, but particularly in the feminine, and for women, I think it's even more wired in, and it's our place that we really need to lead from that place.
Yeah, I so agree. I think we're good at forming relationships, but we're not so good at knowing what's going on inside and being able to express it kindly, clearly, in the moment, not waiting 6 months and then exploding. And why didn't you know this? And the passive aggressiveness, the being really acerbic in our communication, all of that can change when we have good communication skills and good processing skills, and modeling that, especially in the toughest situation, because it's easy to be kind and compassionate and a good communicator with somebody who matches your communication style.
Yes, I love when that happens.
Right. So Gertrude, let's talk about the future. What is the future plan for you, your company, your dreams, your goals?
Well, in this biggest world sense, my vision, or kind of what gets me up in the morning, is, wanting to do my part in creating a world that works for everyone. Right. And everything I feel like we've been talking about is part of that vision. Right. And so, me continuing to work on myself, and my own transformation in this, and staying true to that, so that I can, provide formats then, through coaching. I do masterminds, my podcast and things like that, that we're raising awareness, of what's possible when we go on the journey of self-awareness. And, I'm really excited to keep putting out in the world the Rewrite the Mother Code message, because that, has felt like such a game changer for so many women that I've worked with, in that arena. But continuing to kind of come back, like, one person at a time, and where I'm getting my yearning met to make a difference, I know I can't leave myself out of that. So this phase of my life, really having this beautiful opportunity to put those two together, and then, hope, intend, that it has an impact on those I come in contact with. So, but then, knowing that me doing that, me empowering other people to do that, I really think we can create a world that works for everyone, a sustainable beautiful, world where we can live in harmony with masculine and feminine values.
I love it. And it's a ripple effect. I mean, the more people you touch, the more people they will touch, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into the lightning round. You ready?
Sure.
All right. Fasten the seatbelts. Fill in the blank. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
Smart.
It's amazing
I
how
used to
many
think I
people
wasn't.
say that.
I know. Isn't that fun? Especially probably women say it more.
I definitely did not think I was smart. In fact, I underperformed so that nobody would know the truth, right? Did you do that too?
Well, I did to a degree, and it just wasn't what was valued, in my upbringing, like I said. So I then started to believe I wasn't, I wasn't smart.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you today. What was the number one thing holding you back from becoming a woman of value?
Well, I'll underline and reiterate kind of what I said earlier. It held me back not to. I married the masculine versus develop it myself. So for a long period of time, and I felt like I would say that not developing that myself so that I could use the masculine in service of my feminine values has, and even though I'm working on it, it continues to, because it's always a work in progress to hold me anywhere where I'm doing that. It's holding me back.
Yeah, you're making me think about my own masculine feminine values. I was not taught how to run a business. I was not taught even how to open a bank account. My parents were like, go move to New York City. It's a great place for you. You'll meet a nice guy. Which is like, yes. But how do I run it? I don't know how to put money away. I didn't know how to save money. I didn't know how to build a bank account. And all of those skills, like I've had my kids talk to my financial planner because I want them to know money, like understand your relationship to money. Men and women, like we don't have a lot of these core skills and core values that are developed within us. And so as much as I was kind of a tomboy, I think I really did lead with my feminine values more than my masculine values. And then, kind of flip-flops sometimes.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Yeah. And I think you have to always look for that balance. Like, how do I find what I really consider my gifts and then lead with those gifts, but not in the form of someone else. And I think that for me, speaking in public was always for the big mouthed, extroverted, the ones who made the most noise. And I was not ever that person. And then I became a coach, and I was married to a person who was in the public eye. He was a comedian, professional, on stage, on television. I was behind the scenes helping him write. So never, ever in the public eye. And realized if I want to make it in my career, I have to stop hiding. And it's not just the loudmouth extroverts who are public speakers. It's people with a heart. Yeah. It's people who can have a soft voice, but a strong message.
No,
I saw
really
you nodding.
Well, I'm just acknowledging you because I'm so glad you did. I found that because you have a beautiful voice and what manner of speaking.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we have to stop hiding. So next question, what is the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
And we touched on this one earlier, Sandy, but I would unequivocally underline, build your social emotional intelligence, build your relationship, learning the language of your emotions and honoring them as your superpower.
Love it. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, that was interesting. That what came up for me thinking about that question, which I don't know if it ever has before, was to be curious, to question more. I think there are things that we just think are so, and because the culture tells us that, or our family told us that, and be willing to kind of step back and have more expansive thinking. You know, where I did do that, I'm super happy I did. And there were plenty of places that I didn't, that I now look back and say, I wish I was a lot more curious about that, or dug into that more.
Curiosity is so important. I was interviewed this week for a podcast about curiosity.
Ah,
So it's top of mind for me. But I realized when I was in coaching school that I thought I was an open-minded person. I thought I wasn't a judgmental person. And through coaching, I realized how stuck I was on so many beliefs that I thought they were definitely true. How could they be not? And so curiosity is so key. So I love that answer.
Yeah.
What is something that people often get wrong about you, Gertrude?
Well, again, we've kind of talked about this one, right? That I have that I have skills in the analytical arena, you know, that I'm good with numbers. When people that have known me, you know, over these last number of years, when I tell them I was a finance and accounting major and worked as an economic analyst, they're like, what do you I would never, you know, think about that for as an aspect of you. So people usually get that wrong.
So they don't know that you have skills.
They don't know. Yeah, sorry. They don't know that. And I'm not blaming them. It's certainly not something I highlight or, you know, bring to the forefront.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we all have multifaceted parts of us, and people often only see one part and they jump to a conclusion, which is why curiosity is so important. And finally, Gertrude, how would you like to be remembered?
There's so many ways to answer that, but I think the key one for me, you know, that I'd really like to be remembered as a woman who made a difference, a woman made a difference in a positive way, you know, creating a world that is more in harmony with masculine and feminine values, like we talked about, but more, you know, more in balance, you know, that I did my part, you know, that I was remembered as doing the hard work, you know, I did personally, and that touched people, and it ignited things within them, you know, to make a difference in their worlds and in their lives.
I love that. Well, this is such a beautiful, inspirational conversation.
I know.
And again, you know, reading your bio and knowing as little as I knew about you, I had no idea where this would go. And it's just been a delight. And
for me too, Sandy. Are you kidding?
Thank you.
Wonderful.
So tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So my website is always a place to go, and that's www.drgertrudelyons.com, and also LinkedIn, also at Dr. Gertrude Lyons, and Instagram at Dr. Gertrude Lyons. So try to keep it consistent.
Right. You're so
if you
consistent.
go to any of those main forums are really the best place to find me. And I'd love to hear from anyone that's affiliated with you or listening to you. I'd certainly love to have conversations with.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for being a beacon of light out in the world, and really helping people to find, you know, their true gifts and balance in this crazy world we live in today.
Hear, hear. Very much so. Thanks so much, Sandy.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.